privilege to have you here. So thank you for giving your time up and for being here. So I want to share with everyone, want you to share with everyone your breakthrough, break free story, because it's, Lillian and I were talking a little bit before the actual show started, and when we first met, we really didn't even realize we had been on the phone for so long chatting. I mean, we just went through like a lifetime in no time. So I want to she has a great story. Where do you want to start with your story?
Well, I guess starting from the beginning, I grew up in an abusive home. There was a lot of neglect going on in that home. My mom was kind of manipulative. She was ill a lot of the time, and sometimes that illness was real and sometimes it wasn't. She was really good at playing the guilt game, and she didn't really stick in relationships very long. She was married 4 times before her death, and relationships in between those marriages and what have you. We moved actually more than 13 times before I was 8 years old when we emigrated up here to Canada. I was originally from the States. And so, it was a lot of upheaval in our family life. And 2 of the men that she married unfortunately found me more attractive than they should have. And so I was carrying a lot of baggage as a young teenager. I was sent away for a couple of years away from the family while my mom decided to divorce the most violent man that she had married. And when she was through divorcing him, she called me up and said, basically, you're coming home. But, I didn't really know her anymore. And my brothers were
How long were you away at that point?
A little over 2 years without seeing my family once. And so when I came home, my mom was living in this apartment with no furniture. She had nothing. She was just finding work. And both my brothers, they had been on their own since they were 16 as well. So, there was nobody there. Most of the time I was cooking the meals and taking care of myself and what have you. And we just didn't get along. There wasn't a handbook. There wasn't the kind of therapy that there is now for helping families deal with these kinds of situations. And both of us had a lot of anger and a lot of hurt and a lot of pain and no way to communicate in a positive way. We definitely weren't supportive to each other. And so basically I worked, in order to have spending money and to buy my own clothing and things like that. And I basically came home one day and my mom had given up. My bags were on the back door and I was on my own at the age of 13. And that's where it all began.
So at the age of 13, where did you go to live?
Originally, for the first little while, I had the ability to go to my friends' family homes. I was very popular in school, so I had a lot of friends and I got along with their families. And so, I was spending a night here and a weekend there and that kind of thing for a few weeks before I felt like I was wearing out the welcome of my friends' families. And I didn't feel comfortable because they were all, family, like, eating around the same table and doing all the things that families do. And that was completely foreign to me. So I didn't really hang out or stick around too long. It was just a place to crash. And summer came along and it was warm. It was lovely. And so, there was parties to go to. There was park benches to crash on. And so I kind of did that for a while.
And were you in touch with your mother at all during this time?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Okay.
No, it wasn't until I got my first apartment that we sort of touched base, but it was just very briefly, a quick little meeting and it was over. It wasn't a, hey, come home, let's fix things. It was just a brief meeting. I'm not even sure exactly why or how we met up, but we did and said our highs and went our separate ways. And that was about it until I was 16 when we really started to try to create a relationship again. That was basically due to my foster mother. It's illegal to be on your own at that age.
So wait. Okay, before you go on, back to the first time you had your own apartment. You were how old?
I was 13 and a half when I got my first apartment.
So how did you get your own apartment at 13 and a half?
Well, that's a whole story in itself. At the time I was so innocent. I had no idea what I was, getting into, but it's illegal for someone to be that age and on their own. And rented this apartment from this unscrupulous manager of an apartment building who later on was busted. He was actually renting out apartments and not letting the owners know that those apartments were being rented. So he was sort of skimming off the top and scamming the owners. But of course, I didn't know that then. I was just grateful to have an apartment and find a bean bag to crash on, and that was basically my place. It had a kitchen, it had a bedroom, a bathroom, a living room, a sliding glass door leading out to a balcony, and didn't really need furniture there. We just had a bean bag, and that was it. That was my first place.
And you lived there by yourself?
Well, yeah, off and on. I because of the connections that I was getting with other people that were also on their own. There's a lot of people out there that are on their own at a very young age, and so I became connected with them, and so my place became their haven. It was a place for them to escape to when their dad was being violent, or when their mother was drunk, or when they had no place to go.
How did
So
they find you, or how do you find them?
you run into them. You're walking the streets, you're meeting people, you're going to parties, and you just sort of meet up with people because you're in those circles. You just meet up with them. It's just like meeting people in public school that are within your likes and dislikes and in your social standings and things like that you get in public school. It's like that on the street too. You just meet people just randomly.
I
Yeah,
guess
and
when you're 13 and a half years old and you don't have a parent saying you can't go out tonight, and you're roaming the street, just roaming around, getting something to eat, just roaming around, and you bump into people doing the same thing you're doing.
that's right. That's
Wow.
right. I was very, very innocent being on my own. And I was so lucky to have people around me that were savvy about the street. If someone was bringing drugs around, they would warn me. If someone was really bad news, they would protect me and warn me. And it was really, I was very lucky to have those kinds of sort of big brothers and big sisters that watched out for me and kept me out of
These
trouble.
people, were they people who were living in your building? Were they people who were living on the street too? Were they prostitutes? Who were these
Um,
people?
there were some of all of the above. One person in particular, I remember he lived in a home where his family was very dysfunctional, and there was a lot of alcoholism in that family. And he ended up actually being one of my guardians for a very long time. He was basically teaching me about the things to watch out for and the things to stay away from and the different streets to stay away from, different gangs to stay away from, that kind of thing, and kept me safe, which was amazing that I had that kind of connection out there. So, I worked during the day. I had 3 to 4 different jobs during the day, and, partied at night and partied on the weekends. And that was my life until I was 16.
And were you still in school then?
No,
So you had
no.
dropped out of school.
I had dropped out of school. When I got my first apartment, school was starting up again. And so I had thought, well, I'm going to go back to school because that's where all my friends are. And I was just sort of used to that um, that schedule, that circle of events. And so I did try to stay in school, but it was kind of awkward because I was in a different frame of mind. I was at a point where I was, I'm paying rent. I'm hanging out with people that are 2 and 3 times my age. I have runaways staying at my home, completely different life. The people in school were giggling over boys and kisses and dating. I had no interest in that because, I had been getting attention from men as a child, and I had no interest in dating or boys or any of that kind of thing. And so they were in a different world, completely different world. They had no idea what my life was like. And I found this big gap, this ever widening gap with them. It was really hard for me to concentrate in school because I had to work before and after school and on weekends and evenings, in order to pay my rent. And
And how
it just
did you, we have a question on the chat, how did you pay your rent?
Well, I worked. I never did go to anything like selling drugs or myself or, anything like that. I never went that route. I worked. So, I worked in the onion fields at 5 o'clock in the morning. I worked cleaning out pig pens and horse, you know, um, cages and rabbit cages and kitchen chicken coops and doing a lot of farm work because that's the kind of work that you can get cash for, and it didn't matter what age you were, you could still get a job doing that. I had some babysitting gigs from the past that I had kept. I had some house cleaning that I did, things like that, so random stuff that I just was able to do, everything from yard work to working on farms to working in a nursery. I worked at this nursery every summer for about 4 years, I believe it was, and it was phenomenal there. I got to do a lot of wonderful work with plants and greenhouses and picking tomatoes and grapes and all those kinds of activities, and I really enjoyed that job.
Did you? Chris is asking. Did you have to lie about your age to get any of your jobs?
Yeah, quite frequently. Yeah, one time I got invited to be a hair model. And so I was, I think, 14 at the time, and you're supposed to be 16 to do that. It's, because it's your basic legal age. And I wasn't. And so I lied about my age, and we went through all of the behind the scenes activities to being the model. And, the hairdresser was doing all these different styles and figuring out what he was going to do. And it came down to the point of actually performing, and they wanted my registration papers. So basically, I just didn't show up, which was a good thing. I realized that, but I tried. I tried to get in there, but I didn't. I wasn't able to squeak through on that one.
Wow. So you 13 and a half to 16, you're working on your own. You're living in an apartment. You're doing everything you can do to survive.
Yes.
How did, I guess, social services caught up with you somehow?
Yeah, actually, what happened was one of the apartments that I had a few roommates at the age of 16, and they were all very young. And this one apartment building, it was another sort of rundown apartment building, and so there wasn't a lot of uh, ethical people living there, and they had basically kind of like a block party, only it was an apartment building party, and it got way out of hand, and I got scared. People were, breaking apart the balcony railing, and they were busting apartments apart. It got really bad, and I left. And I left in a cab, and I went to the women's transition house, which I had been to once before with my mom, and it was the only place I knew to go to. And so out of my fear, I ended up getting caught. The women there at the transition center said, you're not supposed to be on your own. And they found me a foster home for a year until I was 17 and legally able to be on my own.
What was the foster home like for you?
Really strange. That's a really Maryland, because it was a father, a mother. There was a young boy there as well. I think he was about 10 or 11 or something like that. And it was this whole, everybody sit down for dinner and rules, which was very foreign to me. And I had to go to school, and it was just really, really strange for me. As soon as I was able to be on my own again, I was on my own again. It was very, very awkward for me. There, I had this stuffed animal that I took with me everywhere I went. It was this rabbit fur koala bear. It was a koala bear made out of rabbit fur. One of my step families, one of the members of those step families, gave it to me because I think they felt sorry for me during a really traumatic time many, many years before. And it meant a huge amount to me. I don't know if it was just the fact that somebody cared or what it was, but I clung to that thing, and I took it everywhere with me. I cared for it. It was very precious to me. So when I went to this foster home and went to school, their little dog ended up getting the stuffed toy and destroyed it. I was heartbroken over that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned rules. And you strike me as someone who, and I wrote down the difference between rules and discipline, because you're quite disciplined.
Yes. Yeah.
So what's the difference to you between a rule and it being disciplined?
A discipline for me, well, self-discipline is holding yourself accountable. So you can look at that person in the mirror and you can meet the eyes of that person. Rules is somebody else's idea of what you should be doing according to their perception of you and your age and your limitations, what they feel are your limitations that they're imposing on you. So rules are quite a bit different from self-discipline. When I think I was 14 years old, I came across this amazing poem, and I remembered it ever since. And, I may not remember every single line, but I remember it goes something like, when you get what you want from your struggle in life and the world makes you king for a day, just go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it's not your mother or father or wife whose judgment upon you must pass. The only one who counts most in your life is the man looking back from the glass. And I don't know what it was about that, but that drove me to have a very high standard of myself. I had a other encounters where my different family members would say, I was never going to amount to this. I was never going to be any good. I was always this way. I had a stepfather who said to me that what he did to me was never going to leave me, that I would always see him in my dreams and in my memories, that he was always going to be a part of me. And I guess this rebel came up inside me and I was like, no way, and I went the other direction out of anger at first. Eventually it became a healthy movement, but at first it was this, you're not going to get to me. You're not going to put limitations on me. I'll show you,
So, so anger does work many times for good, doesn't it?
It can.
It can. But your anger was you didn't hurt anybody. How would you describe the feeling you had, your feeling of anger? It wasn't destructive. It wasn't, you didn't beat anybody up. You didn't hurt yourself. What was it?
I was angry. I didn't, if I saw someone getting involved in a fight and I felt that they were the underdog, I would get involved. I wasn't afraid of pain. I wasn't afraid of physical pain at all. In fact, there was a time in my teenage years when I would allow myself to be in positions where I would get physical pain. I think it was because I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to feel the emotions inside myself. So there were times when the anger was destructive for me. I didn't like the person I saw in the mirror. It took me a long time to get over the shame of the abuse and that kind of thing, to feel like I was clean. I wasn't this dirty, unwanted thing, I always felt like I had to prove myself, that I had to somehow be normal, quote unquote normal, and fit in somehow. And so I had this drive that I felt that I never matched up to. And so, yeah, a lot of self-determination. It took a long time to get over that anger. There was good about the anger and there was negative about the anger. But I think initially anger is what got me through and kept me safe and kept me sane initially.
It's interesting because for so long I would never think, had not thought that anger was a good thing. But I guess, you can look and say whatever it takes, as long as it's legal and, you don't hurt anybody. But anger really can work for your advantage.
Yeah.
It really it stirs us up, and it's like it fuels us and it makes us, it says, come on, you can, let's do it. Even competition or anything that gets you up and out and ready to, handle your life in a way that you need to. You need that extra strength and that extra drive and push.
Absolutely.
And I just, I'm sitting here and I'm wondering, what did you have? How did you have something? And what is that we can bottle and share with other people that, in any age, not just a 13-year-old who's, you know, thrown out on the street, but a 30-year-old or a 60-year-old? What did you have that you were able to, you know, keep going?
Determination,
But where did it come from?
tenacity. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
So
I mean, where did it come from?
something must have happened in my younger years when, they say that your first 5 or 6 years are when you really develop those personality traits. There must have been something back in those days that gave me that strength, that determination, the tenacity, the drive,
Do you ever
a big
remember
drive.
ever remember anyone in your life that you look back with as a mentor or somebody that just I mean, you mentioned that poem, but was there anybody, any real life person in your life that you can look back and say they said something, they did something, they showed you something that just made such a difference?
No,
No.
no, I don't think there was anyone really in my life up to maybe when I was 19 would probably be the earliest memory of someone along those lines. My foster mother, she was the person who helped me understand why I had insomnia, why I was having nightmares. She helped me take my third stepfather to trial. She was with me during that trial. So in that regard, I guess I had someone at that time who was there and trying to help me. She enrolled me in some uh, programs. There was a program called the Girls Attendance Program, where a bunch of girls from similar and worse backgrounds would get together and would do different things. We would do, crafts and programs, listening skills, um, uh, dealing with fear issues and all of those kinds of things, and doing that as a group. So that was definitely powerful for me. I found my solace in the written word. I was a voracious reader, and so I read a lot of books on a variety of different topics. I wrote a lot of poetry to pull emotions out and pour them somewhere so that they weren't destroying me internally. Um, I really felt the lyrics of music. I really felt the prose of poetry. It was just a huge tool for me to be able to process what I was going through.
I want to just remind everyone out there. I know I forgot because I was so engrossed, but I want to remind you of the phone number to please call 919-518-9773. If you'd like to talk to Lillian about anything, you want to share your personal story, anything you have, please feel free to call us, 919-518-9773. You know, I listen to you Self-Educated quite a bit. And, I often say, when you go with the flow of the river, you just do the right thing and you go with the flow of the river. There's always going to be somebody along the river with a helping hand. And you define that. I mean, there were people all along the flow of the river that took you to today. That was always there with a helping hand. But I think the other saving grace was that you were very loving. You seem to have had, you understood something about helping other people, which I think was remarkable considering, where you came from and that nobody was really helping you. But you seem to put other people, I wouldn't say necessarily first, but you were always there to help somebody that less fortunate than thou.
Yeah, I would say that was accurate. I just always understood suffering. I always understood pain, whether it was vocalized or not. You can read it, you can see it, you can feel it, you can smell it. It's just there, and so I knew it, and I could relate to it, and I always wanted to be the person that people could turn to, not necessarily the rescuer. I wasn't going to fix them, but I would be there for them. They needed a place to crash. They needed a meal. They needed just a place to go where they weren't going to be judged, where they weren't going to have to um, you know, put on these faces or these emotional guards where they could relax, even if just, for a moment. Yeah, I was definitely that person, and continue to be that today. um, Animals, especially, I had a huge connection with animals. I still do, probably more with animals than people. And yeah, I can't stand to see an animal hurting in any way. I feel like, if I can make a difference and end somebody's suffering, even just for a moment, then I'll do it.
Do you think you have to know suffering to be that way?
I don't know, actually. I couldn't say, if what another person might, what might influence another person. I think some people, they're just born feeling that way. They might come from a perfect background and a perfect, white picket fence home life, and still have that kind of passion. I'm not really sure. I mean, there's a lot of amazing people out there, and I don't know what their background is, what drove them to do what they do, but yeah, there's a lot of people out there doing some incredible things, and yeah, people to look up to.
Well, I think that whether you have a degree or what, I mean, doing amazing work comes in all shapes and sizes, and it takes us all with whatever sort of background we have, with whatever we have, to do this work. And there's a lot of people out there doing it, and I commend everyone. We have a statement, a question out on the chat from Mike, and he says, Lillian, it would be interesting to know how you resisted the temptation to do bodily harm to your abusers.
Hmm. Well, I think because I felt inadequate. I felt
Powerless?
powerless. Yeah, I really did feel powerless. Even many years after the effect, you just the lasting effect of being a victim, you don't, yeah, you feel powerless. You just don't feel like you have the strength or the ability to do anything. Believe it or not, there was a time when I was so angry that I did play with the idea of trying to find someone to off my worst abuser. um, but that never came about, of course, luckily. But it was sort of a dark fantasy of mine. Yeah, but no, I never did do any physical harm to anyone. There was a time when I saw that same individual in a parking lot. And it was right after my restraining order had come to a close against that individual, where they, of course, weren't allowed to come within contact of me and what have you. And I saw that individual and I recognized them. I don't know if they saw me or recognized me, but instead of feeling strong or feeling like I wanted to go and vocalize anything to them, I shrunk inside. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide. I was terrified. I didn't want to be seen um, by that person. It was a really scary time for me. To that first year, I'd say, after that restraining order, I was very afraid. I'd come across a bush on the street and I'd be walking along and I'd be afraid of what was around that corner of the bush. It was a very fear-ridden time for me.
Well, I want to talk to you about some of the work you're doing now with consciousness, but I think we can't go forward until I know that there's many more things that I'm sure occurred from the time that you were 19 till the present. However, there is an occurrence that occurred that is kind of like, in some cases, the cherry on the top of the cake. That was like the ultimate in all that you went through, and that was what your mother and your stepfather did. So if you don't mind sharing that, I think that would kind of sum up all that stuff.
Okay. Well, my mom and I, we were able to come to some level of forgiveness and letting go of the past. We worked through as much as we could work through. There was a lot of things that we didn't touch on because it was too delicate, too emotional, but we really did a lot of work, the two of us. My mom grew quite a bit emotionally, and we got a lot closer. We became very good friends, um, with some barriers, some distances there to keep safe, but we were very close. I grew to really, um, as close as I could get to her uh, latest husband, Al. It, he was as close to a father figure as I've ever had, and so I grew quite close to him as much as I could allow myself to, and they were both quite chronically ill. My husband and I, we did as much as we could to help them keep their small farm going, and eventually Dave and I moved away from that city, from living in the same city. And so we did sort of caregiving long distance, being there for the phone calls, and being the consolation when when they're tired, or when they were exhausted from their illnesses and depressed and fighting, or whatever that might be going on. I was always there for them, as far as the phone call goes. And of course we would visit and do what we could when we were visiting for them, with them. And eventually, 2 years ago, they decided to end their own lives. They sold their farm, and a couple of days later, they took a couple guns and ended their lives in a hotel room. And so I got a phone call from the police, and my husband and I went tearing off, to the city, and had to deal with the police and getting their personal effects, and dealing with Al's family, and found out that I was the legal estate trustee, so I had to deal with all of their estate. It took a full year basically to deal with everything. Even though they had sold their property, there was all the residual bills and legalities and bank accounts, and notifying everyone, and there's just so much to do, a lot more than it looks like from the outside. It took about a year to go through all of that, and I sort of had to set aside my grief a little bit. I mean, it was devastating, and I had this immense amount of grief, but I had to set some of that aside so that I could process their estate and deal with all the legalities and meetings and accountants, and doing their income taxes and all that kind of stuff. And of course, it was all traveling, so we'd travel, go do some, come back home, and live our own lives until the next appointment. And when we traveled back, it was a 3-hour trip one way, so it was a lot of driving, and that was actually quite therapeutic as well, that quiet time. And so I got to process a lot, but it wasn't until their estate was finished that I really started letting go of a lot of things. I had this dream about a year and a half after their passing, 6 months, maybe 8 months ago. And this dream where I was in this railway station, and there was all these trains going by, and my husband was there with me, and Al walked me through these fields, and he was showing me how green it was and how beautiful it was. And then he said to me, it's time for you to let us go, and it's time to get on that train and move on. And so I did, and that was a really powerful dream.
Thank you. Thank you for being so brave, and being such an amazing woman to sit there and be able to share all of this. And Chris also said she's proud of you and your journey. You're brave, wise, and strong. Thank you for sharing your life story with us. I ditto that plus more. You're you're just an amazing woman. You have set the bar very, very high. I mean, seriously, I like I said when we first started, I've heard lots of stories, but there's something remarkably beautiful and tragic about your life, and and then how beautiful you've turned out to be, regardless of how you started out. And it's just such a story of strength and freedom that it impacted my life tremendously. When I'm going through my day to day, I think of you a lot of times. And I think, goodness gracious, if this young woman could have been, gone through all she went through from the earliest age, then hit every time you turned around, you were being slammed, and you would just be gracious and rose up to every occasion, and not just for yourself, but for all these other people around you, animals. And then you start your radio show to help other people and more people. So
Yeah.
from my heart, I have to say that I'm in love with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You make it sound easier than it was, though. I mean, there was a lot of lows. There was moments when, I was chronically depressed. I had to go through a lot of low times in order to get where I am. My radio show is and my blog and my writing now are basically what hold me together. I find that it's given me reason to be here. It's given me value and purpose in my life, and it's something I don't know where I'd be without those things in my life. That's for sure.
Well, so thank you for sharing everything that you've had. And so with the writing, I know that you've been writing poetry, you've been writing books, and a lot of your the anger from the past has come. You've done a lot of work in your life, and your outlet and the way you've shared is through your poetry. I know you have something that you said you wrote in regards to the grief and the healing. Would you? I know you have it there. Would you read it for us?
Sure. Yes, I'd be glad to. The one that I'd like to read now, I have a couple of them, but I'll read this one for you and see what you feel. This one's called Graying. And it was written in February, so this would be, they committed suicide in at Christmas, so a couple months after their passing. And it goes like this. Graying, stringing hair, flattened, long and untended, hands, coffee, sweat slick as memories flit by, like flashes in a lightning storm. Angered by the loss of a tool used to spark newly discovered memories, hazy and faded, or fill gaps in time, to uncover misunderstandings and shed this pain of mine. How I long to call and chat just one more time. Saddened at faults in me, unraveled by the grief, errors glowing, lighting up, dark tunnels of the past. Yet there's this understanding just the same, forgiveness and acceptance, a letting go and embracing the reflection of mother's traits in me.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, that was beautiful. What's the next one?
Well, the next one that I have is quite a while after their passing. This was written a little over a year past the since the one I just read, and it's called Wings on a Breeze. It was written after a dream that I had, and it sort of celebrates the passing of the grief, or being able to let the grief go. It's called Wings on a Breeze. I dream of feathers ruffled and rippling by the force of the wind, sounds like laundry on the line, swept by a brisk breeze. I'm alive, and I lament a life of bitter resentment, the terrible need for approval now faded with her death, leaves this mind weighted down by thoughts of sacrifice and loss, a regret that childhood dared me the strength to support, while circumstances struck and struck and struck again, taking bits and pieces of her joy, her trust, her strength, and with her soured look on life, I grew into a woman, and then her friend. She no longer fights the wind to stay afloat and fly to that special castle in the sky. Today she soars without bruised wings, nor battered body to hinder her, while I, now in midlife, I who never knew wings, have sprouted a pair, so small, so awkward. Will they enable me to fly one day and try my own flight with the wind?
Oh, both Anna and I just sighed, just went like together at the same time. That was amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing. Have you taken writing courses, or is this just natural?
The poetry is natural. When it came to writing professionally, I started out as a freelance writer and then a staff writer, and eventually worked my way into book publishing. When I decided to take writing seriously as a profession, I took some writing courses, but having come from running a business in the past, I knew that I had to know the office um, do's and don'ts. I needed to know what kind of taxes I would be facing. I wanted to know how to set up my record keeping, how to do the querying, how to manage the whole office and the business of being a writer. So I took a course on that, not on, creative writing or how to write, but more about the business part of being a writer. And I'm so glad I did, because that helped me uh, start the world of writing with a bang. My first article I queried was instantly picked up and turned into a column. So it just started with a bang.
It's You're amazing to me, seriously. Um, Amnon's asking you, would you just give your website when yeah, so that people can have it? Because we'll do it again, but just now. And
Okay.
once again, 919-518-9773. Just call in and take part in this chat that we're having. So you do a lot of work. Your work is about consciousness. So what is your message about consciousness?
Well, I think consciousness comes from uh, realizing that we have an impact. With every moment, every second of the day, we're having an impact, and it's up to us to consciously decide what that impact is going to be. For me, I I have to feel like I'm leaving a positive legacy behind with every day, giving myself a reason for existing, justifying my life, the reason why I live and breathe today. And so for me, that's what gives me my drive. I believe that if we allow people to um, realize that what they do not only has an impact, but it's measurable, that people are going to be impacted by what they do, the planet, the community, whatever it is that they're doing. It will have this ripple effect, and that ripple effect is going to travel across the planet. I think a lot of people don't realize that the power of the individual, and yet it's the only thing that has ever made change is these individuals out there, these wide diverse array of individuals out there working for positive change. And so that's what I like to try and encourage with um, our blog, our radio show, with our writing, with everything that I do. My poetry is all for driving people in that direction. I think it's important that we all stand up and that we try to be that hero that we're seeking in society.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's why we do. That's where this show was birthed, or how this show was birthed, because I have such faith in people. I just have such faith that we can do, that we coming together, standing tall. I had this quote that I came up with a while ago. United, the more united we are, the more independent we can be. So I just feel like coming together and sharing these stories. So how do you define consciousness?
Well, I think it's just being aware. Being conscious is being aware. So, no matter what we're doing, we're aware that we're aware of it, and we're making that conscious decision with each and every moment, whether it's smiling across the boardroom in support of someone that's having a tough time, or whether it's what we're choosing to buy, or the communication that we're offering, or it doesn't matter what it is or where we are, just being aware of it. And I think the other part of conscious, besides being aware, is focusing on leaving a legacy. We're all leaving a legacy, that impact that we're having, just deciding what that impact is going to be. So choosing to leave a positive legacy is part of conscious living. So it can be how you're living your own life, or how you're treating other people, or whether you're deciding to live greener, or it doesn't matter what aspect of your life that you're looking at any given moment of the day, as long as we're looking at it consciously
and engaging in life. I think listening. I'm a big proponent of listening. I think listening is something that we don't teach enough of. I think a listening practice is something everybody should engage in, because in the awareness is listening. Observing is listening. It's being conscious in a moment and being awake in the present moment. I'm curious, you mentioned that you took a listening skills class or something early on. Did you not say that?
Yes.
How did that
Yes.
impact you? Do you remember?
I think it created less fear. I've carried a lot of fear about people, and very self-conscious when I'm around people, especially one-on-one. Groups is not so bad, but one-on-one, or if I'm in a spotlight, it would be very difficult for me. And I think it helped me deal with that. The listening skill part of it was, and it also had to deal with communication. But one of the things that they helped us do, because eye contact is very difficult for people who have come from backgrounds like we did. And one of the things that they helped us in regards to this was to imagine the person is some kind of animal of some sort. So you might picture someone that they're this squirmy little squirrel, or a kitten, or a mouse, or how people have these they resemble animals in some way. And so we would practice assigning that to each other and other people, and in order to sort of reduce the anxiety of having these kinds of communications. I remember that really clearly as of all the things that we did, of all the different projects that we took on. That one really stuck with me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when you're listening and you can only listen one way, as far as I'm concerned, and that's deep. You can't listen just surface. And when you listen deeply, you're listening with your heart. Your heart's open and you're listening. So you can observe people so much more easily when you listen. How is this show for you? How is doing this and being on camera like this and sharing this? How is that for you?
Well, it's good, actually. I really enjoy it. I don't usually do video, streaming video or online TV, although I've done a few of them. This isn't my first, but yeah, I'm okay with it. It's
So
pretty good.
on your show, you do